Saving Edward. It was summertime on the island of Sodor. All the engines were having to work hard and fast, carrying goods and passengers. They cheerily puffed up and down the line all day, all except Edward and Toby. They were more experienced, slow and cautious engines due to their age. But they never gave up on trying their hardest to be really useful engines. One morning, the Fat Controller came to the sheds. He had an important job for Edward.
A special delivery of fruit and vegetables is coming to the docks today,
he told him.
I want you to take them to Knapford.
Oh yes, sir, said Edward, as he puffed away to take on some water.
Now, Thomas, you shall go to the docks and shunt trucks. Then you should go to Marron and collect some important engineers. After that, you can carry on with your usual jobs.
Yes, sir, said Thomas eagerly. Then Thomas heard the big engines were talking about Edward.
Oh, it's a shame. He's such an old engine. Can't even puff properly.
The Fat Controller can't even give him the tough jobs. He's too old for that kind of work. This made Thomas feel terrible. He didn't want Edward to try too hard and end up breaking down. Later, Thomas puffed up to the water tower. Edward was there. Hello again, Thomas, said Edward. Are you feeling well? Asked Thomas. Edward was puzzled. Yes, I am. Better than ever, said Edward. Don't you feel that your work is too heavy for you? Oh, sometimes, but I'll manage like I always do. See you later, Thomas. Thomas wasn't sure about this, but he didn't have time to think as he hurried off to shunt trucks at the docks. But he couldn't stop thinking about what the big engines had said. What if Edward is too weak to pull his train? He would be of no use to the railway, and the Fat Controller would send Edward to the smelter's yard. He wouldn't be useful at all then. At the docks, Thomas shunted some trucks, and then he saw Edward's train in front. Thomas had an idea. If I do Edward's jobs, he won't be so tired, and he'll still be able to do the easier jobs. With this idea in his smoke box, Thomas coupled up to Edward's train and set off. Before long, Edward arrived to pull the train. But he couldn't see it anywhere. Where on earth are my fruit and vegetables? He said. Then Edward's driver talked to the dock manager. Yar, an engine has already taken the fruit and vegetable train, said the dock manager. This made Edward and his crew very surprised. Clanking and wheezing, Thomas rushed to deliver Edward's train, but he forgot to do his own jobs. Hurry up, he told the troublesome trucks.
What for? What for?
They snapped. For Edward, puffed Thomas. Next, Edward chuffed up to the station platform, waiting to collect his passengers. What are you doing here, Edward? Said the station master. Your passengers have just left with another engine. Edward reached crossly. Wait until the Fat Controller hears about this. Meanwhile, Thomas was chuffing along the island with Edward's passengers. Don't worry, Edward, I'm saving you, puffed Thomas. Thomas slowly pulled into the station with Edward's coaches. Thomas was very tired. He had been working all day, and Edward's coaches were very heavy. The Fat Controller saw Thomas.
Thomas, what on earth are you doing? This train is late, he said crossly. And why, come to think of it, are you pulling it? Where is your important passenger train? And first of all, where is Edward?
Thomas didn't want to get Edward into trouble. He had to think of an excuse.
Oh dear, well, Edward took on the wrong sort of coal, sir.
The wrong sort of coal, boomed the Fat Controller. What nonsense, Thomas. I'll find out what Edward has to say about this later.
The Fat Controller was very cross. Then he told Thomas to go back and do his own jobs, which by this time were very, very late.
Yes, sir,
said Thomas. By this point, Gordon had already left with the express. He steamed through the countryside. And then he found Edward, stopped at a signal.
What's all this about the wrong sort of coal? Huffed Gordon.
Edward looked puzzled again. The wrong sort of coal? What are you talking about? Gordon told Edward all about Thomas and the Fat Controller.
So that explains it. Let's see the Fat Controller right away, Edward.
Edward puffed into the station, where he found the Fat Controller looking stern.
We're ever so sorry we didn't do our jobs today, sir,
said Edward's driver. Then Thomas chuffed in with the important engineers.
Excuse me, sir, but it's all my fault. I heard the big engines talking about Edward being old and weak, so I was worried he wouldn't be able to do his job, and you'd send him to the scrapyard, sir.
His frown softened, and the Fat Controller smiled.
Nonsense, Thomas. Edward is a loyal, hard-working, and really useful engine.
Thomas was very relieved. Thank you for worrying about me, Thomas. You really are a great friend. Just check the timetable next time, smiled Edward. And they both agreed. Even when it's hard, never try to change alone what you don't fully understand. Genuine concern for your friends shows empathy, but it's always best to trust in the capabilities of others. The